Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Other Side of Medicine. I'm Dr. Christosik, and I'm glad you took some time to spend with us this evening. I think you're going to be very pleased tonight to find out some solutions for either you or maybe a family member or a friend or a coworker who has, let's say, repeated infections or chronic gut illness like irritable bowel syndrome or SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or maybe inflammatory bowel disease, or maybe they have just a condition that repeatedly, just infection after infection, maybe in the bladder, like chronic interstitial cystitis. Many people have that. And maybe chronic prostatitis, inflammation of the prostate, that just conditions that just won't go away. Maybe you have wounds that won't heal. Maybe they've been there for forever and you just can't find a solution. Maybe you've been treated with antibiotics multiple times for infections of the gut, like H. pylori or C. difficile, and yet they just keep on coming back. Well, tonight, I believe that you are going to be very pleased to find out the number one cause of these chronic conditions that just won't go away. And the doctors just scratch their heads and just say, can't figure it out. And you're stuck in the middle. You're just suffering with this problem and you don't know what to do yourself. You're just absolutely frustrated with it. But let me just share with you that these conditions are very common. Millions of people are suffering with them, and unbeknownst to their doctor, they don't know what to do about it. They just keep on throwing antibiotics and medications and anti-inflammatories. The condition won't go away. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that I think you will find very interesting. I just took an herbal supplement, an oregano oil, and we'll talk about oregano oil tonight, by the way. But I took some, and I got it stuck in my throat here, and I need to kind of wash it down. This is live podcast, folks, but I practice what I preach. I use herbal medicine, and I think you should too. But I think after tonight, you will probably run out to get some herbs to try to help either yourself or maybe a family member or a friend who's suffering with a chronic condition, that you'll find out tonight how you can get over these conditions. Now, it may take a little bit of time and may take some effort, but you need to take a proactive role in your health. And that's what the other side of medicine is all about, is giving you the tools to take proactive role in your health, and also work with your doctor or work with a natural doctor to cooperate with the body to heal itself. Our premise here on the other side of medicine is we have three major principles that we always work with. Number one, common sense. People have lost common sense. They don't look at the simple solutions. They're looking for complicated answers. And sometimes the answer is right in front of our nose. Number two is evidence-based, science-based natural medicine. Very important. Everything we do here on the other side of medicine is verified, is backed up by good, solid research. And then number three, we always have to work in cooperation with nature, because nature is who we're part of. And if we cooperate with nature and use the natural environment that we've been given by God to help to heal our bodies, then our body has the ability to heal itself. So if we use those three principles, most chronic illness can be resolved. Even though people think that they have to live with conditions, and there's no answer for it, and their doctor throws up their hands and said they don't know what to do. Well, when you use these three principles, you'll find out that there are solutions for these chronic problems, and you don't have to accept hook, line, and sinker that there's no answer. So tonight we're going to be talking about something that you may have heard of, maybe not. They're called biofilms. Now, biofilms are all around us in nature. They're evident in so many things. They're in minerals and metals and in plants, and they're even on pond scum. Well, what are biofilms? I know that algae you see on top of ponds, that green algae in the summertime, that's a biofilm. And that's a growth of microorganisms that are protected inside of what's called this biofilm, or this community that is surrounded by slime. So you see that slime on the pond? Well, that's the biofilm. And so it's kind of inside of our bodies, we have it as well. You look inside your mouth, there's a biofilm, and it forms on your teeth, and it's called plaque. And so you go to the dentist, and the dentist does some cleaning of your teeth and gets rid of that biofilm. And what that is a slime on your teeth. And if you don't take it off and you don't get rid of it, and you don't brush your teeth on a regular basis, microorganisms, bacteria and yeast and fungi and viruses and all kinds of other things, especially in your mouth, bacteria, will start to proliferate, will start to grow and start to deteriorate your teeth, and can cause gum infections and gingivitis and a lot of complications. I just had a patient the other day who ended up having this surgery because her gums were actually bleeding so bad, and she had actually cracks in her mouth because she had this condition of gingivitis that got so bad. Well, this is caused by biofilms, and they're all around us, and including in our gut. And as you know, here on the other side of medicine, we focus a lot on gut health because it's the grand central station of the body. And if we care for our gut properly and we invest in the resources to heal our guts, and we pay attention to what's going on in our gut and restore it and cooperate with the body to heal it, then it will have far-reaching effects throughout the entire body. It affects our brain, it affects our skin, it affects our lungs, our heart, our liver, and it affects our immune system, because 75% of the immune system resides inside of the gut. And our gut has a biofilm. The mucus layer inside of our gut is a place where biofilms will form. The mucus layer protects the lining of the gut. But if we end up with biofilms that begin to proliferate, microorganisms that grow inside of this slime, it'll start to break down the lining of the gut, and we'll end up with leaky gut. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but then we end up with conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. And then if we have this biofilm that forms in the small intestine, and we end up with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or we end up with chronic inflammatory bowel diseases like ulcerative colitis down lower, as I said, in the colon, or Crohn's disease. But if we're smart, we'll determine what is going on and why we have things like small intestinal bacterial growth. In our small intestine, we should have very few bacteria living there. But when you have an overgrowth of the bacteria in the small intestine, then you get this small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and you end up having many, many complications. And so there's a lot of symptoms that people end up getting, like, problems with brain fog and fatigue and digestive disturbances and sleep problems. And it just goes on and on, all the symptoms that can occur from that, and the suppressed immune system, a compromised immune system. So once again, the gut can harbor these biofilms just like the plaque in your mouth can. The gut can too. We'll talk a little bit more about that and what you could do about it. That's the most important thing. And if you have something outside of the gut, like we said earlier, maybe in the bladder, like the chronic interstitial cystitis, which is the inflammation in the bladder or in the prostate, biofilms form there as well. These communities, whole cities of these microorganisms that form inside of these cells or communities that have a covering, a protective coating, a slime around them so that they're hard to penetrate. And they're even make them antibiotic resistant. So when you have people who have repeated infections, whether it's in the mouth, like gingivitis, or you have something of nature of the cystitis in the bladder or the prostate, or you've got inflammation like in the gut because you got the inflammatory bowel disease, like the Crohn's disease or the ulcerative colitis. And the doctor is trying to treat those things with antibiotics, but they're not working. It's because these bacteria, these communities inside of this biofilm, inside of this bubble that's surrounded by this mucus layer, the antibiotics oftentimes cannot take care of them and get rid of them. As a matter of fact, the antibiotics will cause them to become stronger. How many people do you know that have had an infection anywhere in the body and the doctor prescribes some antibiotics, and the antibiotics may kill off 80 or 90% of those bacteria that caused that infection, but there's going to be 10 or 20% that are going to be left over that are still living there. And as they lurk back in the recesses of wherever part of the body that it's at, when you are not eating healthy or getting stressed out, or you're not getting enough sleep, or any number of things, your immune system becomes compromised, and those microorganisms that are still living inside of you will start to multiply. And then the doctor ends up treating you again because you have another infection, and they go ahead and treat you with the antibiotic again. And then some of those bacteria will still survive that second treatment. And then the next generation will become even stronger. And they now have that community where they go back to, the ones that are still living, that 10 or 20%, and they communicate with each other. They communicate through what's called quorum signaling or quorum sensing. And that signaling is a communication that they have and that they do through a chemical process. They have enzymes on the cell surface, and that is the messaging unit that they use to communicate with each other microorganisms inside of that biofilm. So these communities start to form, and now they become antibiotic resistant. And they communicate with each other. And not only that, but these microorganisms could not only just have bacteria, you could have viruses, and you could have yeast and fungi and protozoa and all kinds of different microorganisms living inside of that biofilm. And now they become very, very deleterious, very harmful because they give out a lot of toxins. And when they're in the gut, it's one of the worst places to be because on the lining of the gut, you've got that mucus, but you've got nutrients that are coming in. So they've got food, they've got fluid, and they've got the moisture, and they've got all the things that they need, and they form these very sophisticated communities where they have these channels inside of the biofilm to receive nutrients and get rid of waste. And they're living in the gut, which is like a haven for them. So they can continue to proliferate, and they become very resistant to these antibiotics. They become very resistant to the anti-inflammatories that the doctors are prescribing because of the fact that they have developed a resistance, especially to the antibiotics. So my friends, these communities of this, they're living inside this biofilm, are very sophisticated. And medicine today cannot overcome these things, but we have natural things that we'll talk about tonight that are so absolutely marvelous healing agents. They're called the biofilm disruptors. They actually break down what we call the matrix, or that whole mucus layer that's got several different layers, and the natural remedies can actually break those layers down and disrupt them and then expose the microorganisms. And then we use natural antimicrobials instead of using antibiotics, which again, very, very harmful in the long run because they kill off the good bacteria as well as the bad. But the herbs don't do that. The natural remedies don't do that. And not only that, antibiotics are limited in their mechanisms that they are able to get rid of the bacteria with. They may have, one or two or three different mechanisms, whereas natural remedies, whether it's food or whether it's herbs or any other type of remedy, there may be, especially in food or herbs, there may be 1,000 different compounds that affect that biofilm and disrupt it to get rid of it. That's the beautiful thing about nature. Nature has coexisted, and the foods that are on the planet have coexisted with these microorganisms that live on the surfaces of all living things, as well as inanimate objects. Because remember I said these biofilms can form on metal. For example, people who have implants or they have a heart valve or something like that, you could actually end up having an infection from what's developed on the microorganisms in the biofilm, and that could be resistant to the antibiotics. So the point being is it's that the natural remedies have many mechanisms because they've been around for thousands of years coexisting with these microorganisms, and nature has found ways for these foods and herbs to be able to overcome and disrupt the biofilms so that it can penetrate and be able to kill off those harmful microorganisms. And that's the beautiful thing about working with nature. You want to cooperate and work with the body because the body has this innate wisdom and it knows how to use these foods, and it's been using these foods and herbs for thousands and thousands of years. People aren't taking advantage of them. But because you are somebody who's knowledgeable and who's becoming educated and learning about these things here on the other side of medicine, you're privy to this information that your doctor doesn't even know about. Many doctors don't know about these things, and so they throw up their hands and don't know what to do about these repeated infections and these resistant microorganisms. You know, I want to share with you I want to share a story right now, and it's a patient testimony, powerful. And I'll share a couple more later, but I like to start off by sharing this one because it'll really give you a good example of how disruptive these biofilms can be to our health and how doctors will keep on treating patients with medications and then eventually as well surgical procedures because the problem gets out of hand and tissues get so damaged that they have to be surgically removed, that when you cooperate and work with nature, you can turn those things around. Let me share. And by the way, these biofilms can form in the young and in the old. And I'm going to give you some examples of that tonight. But let me just share with you a story, a testimony of a patient, and I've had many of them, who had chronic conditions. And this lady had what's called ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease, which the mucus layer of the large intestine, that's the last part of the colon, that's where your poop comes out. That part of her colon developed an ulceration on it. The mucus layer on that cell lining, and by the way, the cell lining of the large intestine, there's a 2-cell layer thick, whereas the small intestine has only a 1-layer thick. But inside the large intestine, that 2-layer cell layer with the mucus on it got disrupted, and it actually eroded, and she ended up having an ulceration there. And the condition got so bad, and they kept on giving her medications, anti-inflammatories, cortisone, antibiotics. Nothing was working, and she had this for 3 to 4 years, and the doctor said, there's really nothing else we could do for you. We're going to have to surgically remove your colon, the large intestine. She was going to have to walk around with a colostomy bag where the poop was collected, and she had to empty out this bag for the rest of her life. But she heard me when I was back on the radio, and she decided to come in to see what I could do. To make a long story short, we identified the underlying root cause of her problem. We did some testing on her and found out that in her stool sample that there was bacteria that had grown into biofilms. This specific type of bacteria is very common to grow in biofilms, and it started to erode her colon. And we identified it, and we used these natural herbal biofilm disruptors. We cleaned up her diet so we didn't keep on giving the bad bacteria more food to cause more inflammation. We cleaned up her diet. We got her to work on her mindset, thinking more positive and relaxing more and finding ways to be able to de-stress throughout the day. And we worked with her with these natural biofilm disruptors, and we gave her natural antimicrobials to get rid of these harmful microorganisms. And in 3 months' time, she was off all of her medications. She canceled her surgery. And within 6 months, she was going to Europe. She was so disappointed because she loved to travel, and she couldn't travel for years because she had to be so close to a bathroom. She was having 10, 12 bowel movements a day. But once we got to the root cause, we got rid of the biofilms that were eroding the lining of her gut. We cleaned up all of her lifestyle. and then her body was able to get the nutrients she needed. We healed the lining of the gut, and then the body restored her health. Again, all I did is to identify what was irritating and causing more inflammation in her body. We then got rid of the microorganisms and just got rid of those biofilms and broke them down, and then killed off the bad bacteria and gave her the nutrients she needed. We got and cleaned up her diet, and we personalized her diet so that she wasn't eating foods that were causing more inflammation. We did a blood test to figure out which foods that she was reacting to. And we got rid of the sugars and the bad oils. And we gave her whole natural food, mostly a plant-based diet with some cold water fish and some supplements to decrease the inflammation. And her body healed herself. Her body healed itself. That's what God has planted inside the body. And when you work with the body, you'll do that. But again, this is a very commonplace with people who have inflammatory bowel diseases. And they're being treated with cortisone and anti-inflammatories and antibiotics and all kinds of medications. And many of them have their colon removed or parts of their colon removed. And this is a sad state of affairs. If they only would learn about some of these natural principles that we're talking about tonight. So I hope you tell your family and friends about this, because there's so much to be learned, because we're talking about an isolated case here of somebody who had an inflammatory bowel disease, which is an autoimmune condition. And by the way, there's over 100 different autoimmune diseases, and those autoimmune diseases are, again, commonplace. And again, we treat those by cooperating with the body using science-based, evidence-based natural medicines, and the body's able to repair itself and heal itself. So once again, we need to look at nature and cooperate with nature so we could take advantage of that healing power inside the body. So once again, the biofilm damages the lining of the gut, and whether it's in the large intestines or the small intestine, it's the same principle. It's the same principle. Now, remember, I said earlier that the small intestines only has one cell layer thick, whereas the large intestine has 2 cell layer thick. But that mucus still protects the small intestine. And you can get inflammation there in that small intestine. And that's what happens with people with SIBO. And people with SIBO, again, or if they have irritable bowel, that, again, you're going to end up having diarrhea, or you're going to have constipation. You can have brain fog and joint pains and fatigue and skin disorders, all kinds of problems because of the fact that you are not getting to the root cause, which is the microorganisms that are living there that are often resistant to the antibiotics. Once again, doctors that are conventional doctors are treating things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, with antibiotics. And those antibiotics will kill off, like I said, 80 to 90% of them, but you'll have 10 or 20% left over, and they become stronger and more resistant. So we want to try to work with nature and cooperate with the body to help to heal itself. That's really the only way I think it should go. So biofilms can become very deleterious throughout the entire body. And we need to recognize that bacteria can also morph into not just bacteria, as I said earlier. It could become, that biofilm could have yeast and viruses and bacteria as well as protozoa, and they could all live together. And there are different species but they communicate with each other. How in the world does that happen? Remember, I talked about that quorum signaling. They have on their surface of their cells, they have these receptor sites for these enzymes that communicate with each other. That's a very sophisticated system that they have to talk with each other to find ways to resist these medications. But again, if we work with the natural systems of the body and work with what's been used for thousands of years, we can disrupt those microorganisms in that biofilm, and we can then start to help the body to heal itself. These microorganisms, they're tough. That's why people end up having, like I said earlier, infections that don't heal. Somebody that has an infection. I had a gentleman that had an infection on his abdomen that bore a hole in his abdomen, and he had it there for years. And doctors kept on treating that over and over and over again. And he had it there for years. He heard me on the radio again. We got to the root cause. He had, again, biofilm inside of his gut that was literally spreading toxins throughout the body on the surface of the skin that caused the infection on his skin that bore a hole in his skin. Because when you have the lining of the gut that gets broken down, the mucus layer of the gut, now we're talking about the small intestines right now. When that lining, that mucus layer gets broken down, the bacteria could start to grow in that small intestines. Now, you got to remember, bacteria don't belong in the small intestines, or very few. But in the large intestine have a lot of bacteria, 10 times more bacteria inside the large intestine than we have human cells. 100 trillion different microorganisms living inside of our large intestine, but the small intestine have very few. But if that mucus layer in the small intestine that's farther up in the digestive tract, you have the stomach, and then you have the small intestine, then you have the large intestine. But that small intestine, if that mucus layer gets damaged because of poor nutrition, because of stress, because of junk foods, because of medications, there's a lot of reasons why it happens. That mucus layer gets disrupted. Then what could happen is the microorganisms in that biofilm, the biofilm will attach to the mucus layer where there is an empty space, and those biofilms now are attached to the small intestine where nutrients are supposed to get absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, instead of having nutrients get absorbed, the microorganisms release toxic substances. They have a waste matter elimination system in these biofilms. They're channels that eliminate waste. And that elimination of that waste ends up inside of our bloodstream. Instead of having nutrients get absorbed, we end up having some toxins get absorbed from the harmful microorganisms, and then travels through the entire bloodstream, and it can end up causing damage to different parts of the body. Well, back to that gentleman who had the ulceration on the surface of his abdomen by his belly button. That ulceration, that hole, they kept on trying to clean it, and it kept on getting, over the years, worse and worse and worse. Once we got his gut and small intestine back in good working order, healed the lining of the gut, got rid of the biofilm, got rid of those harmful microorganisms. We used biofilm disruptors. We got him to clean up his lifestyle, get rid of those variables that were causing him to have the weakened immune system. We cleaned up his diet, got him to manage his stress, find ways to laugh more, to get some exercise, to drink more water, to eat whole foods, to reduce the animal protein, to eat more whole foods, eat more plant-based foods, and got rid of those harmful microorganisms out of his gut. His ulceration healed. And not only that, he had more energy, his better thinking, and all the things that he was suffering with for years just cleared away. This is the kind of thing that I see and have watched with over the last 35 years and helping over 20,000 patients. It's been a wonderful experience to see how the body heals itself. And medicine wasn't able to do anything for that gentleman or the woman who had ulcerative colitis. My friends, your doctor's not going to tell you these things. They're not aware of the research that is so prolific. There's so much research available demonstrating that the body, when it's given the resources, can heal itself. It's just a beautiful thing to watch. And I'd love to see it over the years. I've just watched it. And again, when you disrupt these biofilms, you have these people with chronic infections that they're just end up ceasing. And so we need to begin to cooperate with nature and take advantage of the healing power. You know, the Greeks had a wonderful phrase called vis, V-I-S, medicatrix naturae, the healing power of nature. I love that phrase, the healing power of nature. We need to tap into that. We need to take advantage of that. And so we need to learn how to cooperate with nature. I think that's the message I really like to convey tonight. And so we can affect our health in a very, very powerful way. And again, these biofilms resist antibiotics routinely. And they, again, they can talk to each other. And as I said, they signal each other, and they could be all kinds of different species. And again, antibiotics oftentimes those things will just laugh at them. Actually, research has actually shown that some of these microorganisms, some of these bacteria actually grow bigger and stronger when they're given antibiotics. Now, that's perplexing, and that's also scary. So once again, if you look at how to get rid of these things, it's not easy. It takes work, but because they protect each other. These microorganisms, they protect each other. You have these mucus layers, and they protect each other. And the longer they're there, the harder they are to get out. But again, if you're diligent and you're ready to cooperate with nature, these chronic infections, these chronic conditions can be resolved. So I would love to have you join my community. I just want to take a little time right now to talk about my Gut 911 prescription community. You know, you can't try to live a healthy lifestyle on your own, on yourself by yourself today. That's what I was trying to say. There's so many distractions that we have in our environment. There's so many things that we see on television, that we see our friends and families who are not following natural principles. And so we're tempted by them. We need to have reinforcement to eat natural foods. And the Gut 911 prescription community is a support community. The blue zones are a great example of what I'm talking about. If you haven't heard about the blue zones, National Geographic did a study of the healthiest populations on the planet. And what they found was there was 5 regions in the world, and these people were the healthiest people in the world. They lived to be 100 and beyond, active lifestyles, and they all had several things that were in common. They ate natural foods, mostly plant-based diets. They exercised as part of their lifestyle. It wasn't that they went to the gym and they worked out for an hour a day. No, they just had an active lifestyle every single day. They took time to relax and enjoy and smell the roses and be able to enjoy family and friends. And they had a tight knit group of people, a circle of friends that was tight knit, closely connected. Very important. And they got good sleep, and they ate, as I said, natural foods, and they used herbs, and they really didn't overeat. These variables were very across the board the same. And the key was, the most important thing is that they had this tight knit community of people that supported each other and their healthy lifestyle. And that's what the Gut 911 prescription community is. I've just recently put together and formed this community of people, and I'd like to invite you to come and join us. It's free, and there's lots of resources there. You know, I've written 7 books on natural medicine. I do these podcasts. I have social media posts that I do every single day. I have just loads of resources that are free that you could take advantage of. And there's people there that are part of the community that we're growing, and we're helping each other. We're supporting each other. And starting in June, I'm going to be coming together once or twice per month, and I'm going to give a special webinar that's not found anywhere else for a half hour, 20 minutes to a half hour, that I'll present in the community, and then I'll take questions from you and other people in the community. And we'll have questions and answer time, and we'll share with each other and support each other and have fun together. That's what we want to do. So I want to invite you to come and join us so you could take advantage to learn how to heal your body from the inside out using nature. So conventional medicine, again, they're just going to rely more on medications and surgical procedures, and you're going to end up going to your grave never realizing the full potential that your body has to heal itself and to live full of energy, clear thinking, limited or no pain, and to a ripe old age. You know, I'm going to be 77 coming up here soon. I just went to the gym today. I went swimming and worked out with weights. And I play basketball with college students. And I play tennis and I ride bicycles and I do triathlons at 77 years old. I'll be 77 in July, 2nd of July. And I want you to be like that too. I want you to enjoy your life in good health to a long, ripe old age. If you join us, I'll teach you how to do it. You can take advantage of it, and we can form our own blue zone right here on the internet, sharing with each other. So I hope you do take advantage of that. So, you know, we talk about the microbiome, which is the microorganisms living inside of our gut. Remember I said inside of our gut, we have 10 times more bacteria than we have human cells. Now, the harmful microorganisms inside of that biofilm, they also have a community that they form that's called the microbiome. Just like we have a microbiome in our gut of healthy bacteria, they form these microbiomes that they are resistant to these antibiotics and other medications, and they kind of get deep-seated, and they cause these illnesses, these chronic conditions. But we can disrupt them, again, with a natural solution. So we know that there's good microbiomes and there's bad microbiomes. We want to support the good microbiome. We want to support the good beneficial bacteria inside of our gut. And that's what we teach you how to do by eating natural foods, by eating prebiotics, which is the food that feeds the good bacteria. And we have you get rid of the food that feeds the bad bacteria to allow that microbiome inside that biofilm to get stronger. We don't want to do that. We want to discourage them. We want to cut off their food supply. Their food supply is the junk food that the average person is eating, the sugar, the, the refined carbohydrates, the bad oils, the oils that are hydrogenated, and all these colors added and preservatives added, and all the foods that are loaded with antibiotics. And yes, foods are loaded with antibiotics. Milk and animal protein are pumped with antibiotics. And today, even the fruits and vegetables are sprayed with antibiotic sprays. It's a sad state of affairs. That's why I encourage you to buy organic foods as much as possible. And if you're a wise shopper and you buy on sale, you can do that. And we teach you how to do that inside of our community. So we need to learn how to, again, cooperate with nature. And again, conventional medicine is not giving people the information on how to do this. But again, we don't want to encourage the growth of these microbiomes. Okay, I'm going to make sure here. Let's see. Talk about all the things I want to get out here. Okay, let's see here. So let's talk about what are some of the things that we can do to disrupt the biofilm with foods and herbs and supplementation. I think that's the next thing that we'd like to talk about here. Let's start with food. I think because for me, food is the best medicine. You know, Hippocrates, the father of medicine, modern medicine calls Hippocrates the father of medicine. But does modern medicine educate patients about eating whole foods? I don't think so. I just recently had a kidney stone removed. That was surgically removed. There is a place for medicine, and we got to applaud medicine where its recognition should be made. I had a kidney stone about the size of a marble. It was the size of a marble. It was that big. Now, let me back up. About 12 years ago, I had a kidney stone that was the size of a pea, like green pea. And that's pretty big, but it's not the size of a marble. But that 12 years ago, I was able to pass that stone by using herbs. And I had zero pain when I passed it. And I've had many people with sizes that size, the size of a pea or smaller, because that's a pretty big stone as well, that pass their kidney stones without any pain. And these are calcium oxalate stones even, which have jagged spurs on them that cause a lot of people pain when they have those. But I've had myself, I passed that kidney stone 12 years ago with zero pain. And I took it and got it analyzed when I passed it. And it was, sure enough, a calcium oxalate stone. And I've had many patients, as I said, who've passed these type of stones without any pain. But this stone that I had was bigger than normal. It wasn't going to come out with herbs. There's just no way that a size of a marble is going to get through the ureter. There's no way. So I had to have it surgically removed, and I applaud the urologist who did it for me. But listen to this. After the surgery was done, after I went back for a follow-up, I asked the doctor, I said, is there anything that I should be avoiding as far as foods? He goes, no, eat whatever you want. That's a carte blanche statement that many doctors across the nation say today. After they treat you with antibiotics or treat you with a surgical procedure or any kind of medication, whatever the condition is, just eat whatever you want. This is an educated man was telling me, just eat whatever I want. There's things that I shouldn't be eating with the kidney stones, especially calcium oxalate stones. And there's things that you can do to prevent them. I love spinach, and I was eating way too much spinach, so I could have really avoided it. I thought the first time I got the kidney stone, I wasn't going to never have another one, but sure enough, I had another one, and I have a family history of it. So I have to stay away from the things that are loaded with calcium oxalate. So cranberries and spinach and other foods have calcium oxalate. So I need to stay away from those things. So again, you just can't eat whatever you want. You have to follow natural principles to work with the body to heal itself. Okay, so foods. Okay, so what are the foods that help to disrupt the biofilm? Well, let's talk about those right now. Pomegranate. Pomegranate, you know, that beautiful red fruit that comes from the Middle East, those seeds, those pomegranate seeds, that juice from the pomegranate is a powerful biofilm disruptor. Cranberry juice, I mentioned, that's another biofilm disruptor. So you can get it in a juice, you can get it in a powder. I like to have people use it in convenient forms that are easy to take, either in a capsule or in a powder form, and you can mix it with water. And if you take those things on a regular basis, it'll break down the matrix, the mucus layers of that biofilm, and it'll break into it so that you can expose those microorganisms, so then you can come in with antimicrobial agents like herbs to kill them off. And we'll talk about some of the biodisruptors that break up that matrix, that mucus, those layers, that also will kill the bacteria. So it's a twofer. You get 2 for 1, like oregano oil. It actually it's a biodisruptor. It breaks up that matrix, but it also kills the harmful microorganisms. So does things like golden seal and berberine. Berberine is a compound. It's a natural compound that's inside of herbs like Oregon grape and other herbs that have this compound called berberine. It's a yellow compound. It's a very powerful biofilm disruptor. You can get it in capsules, and that's what I give to my patients to take. So you could take that along with oregano, and it'll be a powerful biofilm disruptor, as well as it'll help the absorption of the oregano oil, and it'll kill off that bacteria. So you could use pomegranate and powder or capsules, and you could take that every day along with the cranberry, and you could drink green tea. Green tea has compounds in it that help to break down the mucus, the biofilm disruptor. So the layers of mucus, it breaks it down in a very, very powerful way. Things like garlic does the same thing. So whole food, fresh garlic, you want to use that. You know, that's something you can do very easily by taking a clove of garlic and maybe have some rice with it, or some whole grain bread or some crackers, so it doesn't, that strong oils in there doesn't bother you when you do that. So you can take it along simultaneously with the piece of bread or the rice and eat the whole clove garlic. I remember my dad, when he was living, we used to have garlic parties, and we would take 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 cloves of garlic, and we would sit there and we'd watch the Cavaliers basketball games, and we'd eat cloves of garlic, and we'd have some whole grain bread with it or some rice. Very powerful biofilm disruptor. So you can use, again, get garlic in capsules if you don't want to do it that way. You can do it that way too, whichever is most convenient for you. Don't make excuses. Just find the delivery system that best suits you. I love the taste of fresh garlic, and I enjoy having the fresh garlic with a meal like a pasta with some tomato sauce and some marinara sauce, and some pasta and some fresh garlic. I just absolutely love it. But whatever's best for you, just accommodate what fits you. So the these natural biodisruptors, they knock out uh, the bacteria after they open up and expose that bacteria and open up that biofilm, that bubble, burst the bubble and exposes the microorganism. Then you could use the natural stuff to kill them. So that's again what I use to help to break up the biofilm. And again, it's tough, it's sticky, and those especially in the gut. When you've got it inside the gut, remember I mentioned earlier, the gut has a warm, moist area with that mucus there, and there's a lot of nutrients there, and the temperature is just right, and so that biofilm is going to proliferate. So you've got to use these things that are going to disrupt it and get rid of it. I call it the five. I use what's called the 5 R's. The 5 R's to get rid of the biofilm. Basically, it's kind of like a detox for the body, but it's cleansing and getting rid of the biofilm in this particular instance. And so the first thing you want to do is remove, and then you want to replace, and then you want to reinoculate, and you want to repair, and you want to rebalance. And we're going to talk about each one of those. Okay, those are the 5 R's. The first thing you want to is remove. You want to remove any of the things that are feeding the harmful microorganisms that are living inside that biofilm. What are those things? Well, I mentioned them earlier. Sugar and refined carbohydrates and these bad oils, these seed oils that are hydrogenated, like sunflower oil or safflower oil or canola oil. If they don't say cold pressed or expeller pressed, do not use those oils. As a matter of fact, just stick with extra virgin olive oil, or use some coconut oil. Maybe a couple tablespoons of coconut oil per day is absolutely fine. I wouldn't use more than a couple tablespoons a day, but I would suggest that. And by the way, coconut oil is also good to feed the microbiome as well. And it's got some substances that will actually break through the biofilm as well. There's some compounds in there. So again, food is your best medicine. And you want to cut off the supply of the harmful bacteria and microorganisms, the yeast and the viruses or whatever else is living in that biofilm, by cutting off their food supply, which is the junk food. So again, food is the best medicine. You want to make sure that you're giving them the right food. And again, you're not going to help it any if you're eating, Hostess Twinkies and Kix cereals or Twix cereals with the sugar and all the food colorings, and you're eating, Hostess Twinkies, as I said, and you're eating donuts and eating sugary foods and ice cream and all this stuff, and you're eating very little fruits and vegetables. You're getting loads of sugar and refined foods. It's just going to proliferate the growth of that biofilm, and it'll just get more robust, and they'll form more communities because they actually split. One community will get to a saturation point, then it splits into another community, and they'll just keep on going on. And they get more and more, and they're tougher and tougher. They get harder and harder to get rid of. And that's why many people have these things for years and years and years. And the doctors say, well, there's nothing else we can do but just give you symptomatic treatment. It's not true. It's not true. If you've got chronic conditions that are not healing, whether it's an infection, or whether it's an inflammatory bowel condition, or whether it's a bladder inflammation, or repeated bladder infections, or repeated gut infection. Maybe you have C. difficile. Now, by the way, speaking of C. difficile, let me share a story about a testimony Another one of my patients. I've had many patients with C. difficile, which is a very dangerous bacteria that lives inside the gut. It's called C. difficile. And this C. difficile, many people will have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different times. This will keep on coming over, back again, over and over again. It keeps on coming back. I had this elderly woman, and her daughter heard me on the radio, and she ended up coming into my practice, and her mother had these repeated C. difficile infections, and they were treated with antibiotics over and over again. And she was suffering with these things, and she had fatigue, and she had skin disorders, and she had brain fog, and she had, disruption of her sleep. And, she just had so many problems. She had digestive disturbances. She was suffering over and over again for years. And she had a biofilm inside of her gut that we were able to disrupt with the natural things we're talking about here tonight. And within, I believe it was 3 months, it didn't take long, her mom's repeated infections stopped. And I saw her about a year later in a health food store, and she had absolutely no more problems. And I've seen her daughter since then. She said her mom's absolutely fine. She never had any more problems. She had 5 or 6 or 7 different repeated infections. And by the way, that was an elderly woman. But I want to tell you, it happens in the young too. I had a teenager. It was about, I think he was around 17 or 18 years old. And he had the C. difficile infection about 4 or 5 times. They kept on treating with antibiotics, kept on coming back. Once again, we treated him with this natural protocol that I'm talking with you right now about. We personalized his diet. We did a blood test to figure out which foods were right for his body. And we got rid of the foods that were feeding the biofilm, the microorganisms. And we gave him biofilm disruptors. And we supported his immune system, because people who have these repeated infections have compromised immune systems. And then we were able to stop the repeated infections because we got rid of the biofilm. So it happens with young, and it happens with middle-aged people, it happens with older people. Age is not a respecter. These biofilmed microorganisms are not a respecter of age. It can happen in young and old. Once again, you cooperate with the body, and the body will work to heal itself. Well, we're running out of time here, but I just want to kind of wrap things up. And I want to talk about a few more things that you can use. There's an herb that many people use and today and hear about. It's called turmeric. And turmeric has a compound in it called curcumin. That's a natural compound inside turmeric. It's a very powerful biofilm disruptor. So you can use that. You can use rosemary, the herb rosemary. I mean, when you have chronic infections, though, you don't want to just use the herb to sprinkle it on your food. You want to get like extracts. These are herbal extracts. They're like liquids that are concentrated sources of these herbs, like rosemary or peppermint oil. These things are food grade, and they disrupt the biofilm, and they actually feed the good bacteria at the same time. So rosemary extract and peppermint oil and turmeric and garlic and apple cider vinegar. Don't forget about apple cider vinegar, like Bragg's, which got that raw apple cider vinegar. That is a very acidic and gets rid of the harmful bacteria and really does a nice job to feed the good bacteria. So you want to feed the good bacteria because they fight the bad bacteria too. They work with the body to heal itself. That's what you want to do. You want to work in concert. And by the way, all these things are shown in research. And research is validating that all these things work to help to break up these biofilms. That's the beautiful thing about these things is the research is there, and there's hundreds and hundreds of studies to prove it. So again, you want to make sure that you create the right environment. You want to make sure that you eat whole foods, that you have the right mindset, that you get rid of stinking thinking, that you get enough restful sleep, that you're managing your stress, that you're drinking plenty of water, half your weight in ounces of water, that you're eating mostly a plant-based diet. Reduce the animal protein, eat more cold water fish, the smaller cold water fish like salmon and herring and sardines and cod. Make sure it's wild caught. And it doesn't come from China because you don't want to glow in the dark. Use these common sense things. Work with nature. Eat organic foods. And thank the good Lord, because the power of the body to heal itself, it's not just by coincidence. It's been given to us as a gift. Well, my friends, we have run out of time, but tell your family and friends about the other side of medicine. And this will be posted on our social media, Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And then we'll be providing you another episode next week. And don't forget about our Gut 911 prescription community. I encourage you to join us. Become part of our community of friends who support each other. Until next week, my friends, I wish you all the good health, and I ask that you just work with nature, use common sense, and use things that are backed up by science. Don't get caught up in stuff on the internet of somebody said this about this or that. Make sure it's backed up by good science, and not just one or two studies, multiple studies. So until next week, may the good Lord bless you. Until next week, take care. Here's to your health.